Hey guys, how are we all? Welcome back to the Twist the Bones podcast, where each week I read and react to a bunch of spooky, scary, horrifying and weird stories that range from ghosts, the supernatural, anything like that, to real life encounters with creepy people or potentially dangerous people like stalkers or anything really freaky like that. Just like each week, I want to quickly go over some housekeeping things before I do get into this week's story. So firstly, I will always credit the people who wrote these stories, so all the information will be in the description of each episode if you want to go and support those content creators. And secondly, if you have your own scary story, so like I said at the beginning, whether that be a ghost story or any form of horror or scary story, or even an encounter with any creepy people in real life, whatever it is, if you want it to feature in a future episode, please reach out and send your story over to me. I would absolutely love to read it out. You can do this by either using the Facebook page, which is Twist the Bones Podcast. You can email it to twistthebonespod@gmail.com, or you can leave it over on our subreddit page, which I think is also just Twist the Bones Podcast. And I think that's it. So let's get into this week's story. Like usual, we are on the yourghoststories.com website. This was written by Sharing is Caring, and it is called Basement Haunting. I used to stay in a rent-out basement with my older sister, who comes and goes very often, so that means I'm mostly alone. The basement has all utilities provided, and the ceiling of the basement at parts has a low dip. The distance from the living room, bathroom, kitchen is only a few footsteps away from the bedroom I sleep in. There's a small staircase outside that leads the backyard into the basement from the back, and there's an indoor staircase that connects the basement to the home upstairs. This detail is important for later on in my experience. So my sister stayed in the basement a month before I decided to move into the same place with her. Shortly after I arrived, she decided to let me stay in the basement alone, to be, in her words, independent, while she stays with her little girlfriends. Of course I was a little worried about staying down in the basement alone, but later on the day after unpacking, I got to meet the landlords, who were very overly protective, but kind of friendly, nothing too terrible or tyrannical about them. So I decided that I should just suck it up and stay at the place, since the basement's rent is hell of a lot cheaper compared to other places up in Northern Virginia. A month and a half had passed, and things seemed fine, up until one night, when I came home from work at around 7 p.m. I was in the kitchen, making some delicious independent ramen noodles in a cup. The landlord, female landlord, the wife, decides to come downstairs to see what I was up to. She does this very often when she notices I'm using a utility. We stood by the sink, next to a door that leads outside, and we chit-chatted away, until I noticed the door behind her opening. My immediate reaction was, oh, that must be my sister coming in. The landlord looked behind her, and once the door opened halfway, we realised no one was there. Seeing how freaked I looked as she was closing back the door, she told me, oh, haha, it's just the wind, don't worry. And of course that night, there was no wind. It was still a hot summer night. I told her, well, there's been no wind at all today, but okay. And with that being said, she patted me on the shoulder and told me that she's going to bed and went right upstairs, the indoor stairs. And as soon as she went upstairs, I ran right into the bedroom, blasted some YouTube videos off a playlist I had, and called it a night. I was too scared. A few weeks later, it was my sister's birthday. Around this time, I was away on a trip, so I was not at the basement for half a month. So some parts of this experience is also my sister's. She's okay with me sharing this. On her birthday, she received a big plastic helium balloon that she likes to keep behind the bedroom door. One day, she invited her best friend over to sleep. Her friend is a rational person that is usually calm. It's just her personality. And when sleeping over, everything went well, except for when it was the morning of that sleepover. My sister got up early to leave to go to work, and her friend woke up near 1 p.m. When her friend was all ready to leave the basement and was heading out to her car, before she could make it into the kitchen to go to the outside stairs, she heard a rustling behind her. Immediately she turned. The balloon was right behind her. Of course, she shrugged it off and thought, probably got caught onto my t-shirt. She took the balloon and threw it behind the door in the bedroom and continued her way into the kitchen. But as soon as she could even step a foot into the kitchen, she heard the noise and turned around. The balloon was right behind her. This time it really freaked her out, especially since there's a low ceiling dip that should have stopped the balloon from clinging onto her shirt if that was the case. So she grabbed the balloon, threw it behind the bedroom door and continued on towards the kitchen as quick as possible. But once more, the moment she reaches the kitchen, she heard the same rustling sound again. And this time she reacted quick. She snatched the balloon, threw it right behind the bedroom door, slammed the bedroom door tight and ran straight out of the basement and into her car. Later on that evening, the same day, when my sister was at work, my sister and her friend met up to have another sleepover, since I was gone still at the time. When they were lying in bed, my sister looked over to her friend and noticed the balloon was hovering over her friend. My sister joked, "Oh wow, you like that balloon enough to bring it to bed? Really? Come on." And my sister's friend replied, "No, it's been following me all day." Hearing this, my sister was a little startled, so she turned on the lights, grabbed the balloon and popped it, and that was the end of that. After this balloon incident, I came home a few days afterwards, and this is when the strange things picked up quick and they started happening. At this time, summer had passed, we were creeping into the fall, and my sister went back to staying with her friend, so I'm alone again. It started with seeing a tiny bright white circle speck that would appear when I'm in the restroom doing my business, or when I was lounging in the bedroom. I tried convincing myself at the time, oh, it's just a fairy, how cute, it's following me, just to calm myself down. I even tried looking around the room doing eye exercises to see if the speck would follow along, but the speck didn't. The speck would float towards me in its own speed and distance and then just disappear, or sometimes just lingered around. I will only see this speck when I'm in the basement. When I'm outside or in other buildings, I don't see the speck. And after 2 weeks after seeing the speck on and off, it all of a sudden stopped. Around 2:30 AM, I was lounging in bed watching YouTube videos, and quickly I noticed a black dime-shaped circle and dot shooting fast out from my pillow and into my shelf of clothes to my right. I jumped up the moment I saw it, and immediately picked up my pillow and looked around. There was absolutely nothing there. After this occurred, I texted my sister about it. She texted me back, ignoring what I texted her, asking if I'd like to go get some coffee tomorrow with her and her friend. Of course I agreed to the little hangout. And the next day when I meet up with her, I told her again about the black spot and I told her of the speck I'd also been seeing. She just shrugged it off and told me, "You don't need me to sleep with you in that basement. You'll be fine. You're just tired and seeing things." Of course I'm well rested, but I just agreed to whatever she said. And about a week and a half later since this incident, at around 2:40 AM, I was yet again lounging and watching YouTube videos. I had this odd feeling that I should look up, so I just decided to perk my head up from my pillow for my own amusement. However, I saw this strange fuzzy mist or dust thing forming in a wispy sort of way right at the foot of my bed. I squinted my eyes and rubbed them, and it was still forming, this mist in that spot. I forced some courage into me to try and reach and touch the mist, and as soon as I started reaching for it, it all disappeared. A little shaken by this, I kept telling myself it's just a cute fairy or a pretty angel, or even just gnats or a crazy indoor dust storm. I lie back down and blast my YouTube videos again, and eventually I fell asleep with the lights on. So after this incident, things calmed down again. There were times when I would leave to go to work and the landlord would complain about how I left the bathroom lights on or living room lights on, when I know for sure I'd turned them all off. And this upset me greatly, and there were still days where I would sometimes see this speck. Eventually, I decided to move back down south with my parents. My job did not work out too well, and I didn't like staying in the basement, and the landlords were too protective. They always asked me where I was going at all times. A month later, I finally moved out of the place to head back home, while my sister decides to stay at the basement for a few days before she moves out as well. To make things short for my sister's half of the story, the night when she decides to move out of the basement, once I had already settled in at my parents' home, she admits to me that she had a dream that night. The landlords, who are now in near 50s, used to have a 12-year-old daughter that died in that home. My sister also admitted to me that before I had moved into the basement, she also had seen the same black spot that flew out from my pillow. She even admits to me that she felt watched when she passes the staircase that led to the upstairs of the house. She even confessed to me that one of the days when she was home to sleep over with me, at around 1:50 AM, she woke up to a bright orb and wisp hovering in the room. It scared her very badly, and she never mentioned any of this to me, out of knowing I will throw a fit and refuse to stay in the basement alone. I'm very glad she confessed all of this to me. It shows I'm not the only one to feel uneasy. I'd really like to know what this black circle thing is we both keep seeing shooting out the pillow so fast, and if my sister's dream could be true. The landlords are both near their 50s and refuse greatly to have a child when we bring it up in conversation. And that is the end of that one. Very, very interesting. I know that basements and loft spaces are like cliche haunted places, but there is something about them that is really, really freaky, especially if you are having things like that happen. I would be absolutely terrified. No matter how low that rent is, I would not be staying there. After like one or two things, fair enough, but if it just kept happening, I would be out of there. So you guys are braver than I am. But either way, thank you so much for listening to this week's story. Feel free to drop me your own stories over on the email, the Reddit and the Facebook page like I mentioned at the start. If you want to keep up with me in the meantime, you can do by heading over to my Instagram, which is just at Alien Queen Meg. And apart from that, I will catch you in my next one. Stay spooky, guys.